What is up, my dashing dudes and darling dames? I am the Hans TV, and I'd like to welcome you back to a subreddit that I haven't done in a while, but I still love nonetheless. It's r/TalesFromRetail. Our first post for today comes from Julius Caesar 629. The time I told a mean old man to shut the F up and leave me alone. A couple of years ago, when I worked at a national hardware store chain, I had an encounter with a mean older man. Let me specify that when I say I worked at the store, I didn't work for the store. This is important later. I worked for the company that supplied the flowers and shrubs and trees, but I was always at that store when I worked. For some background, I'm pursuing a degree in forestry, minoring in horticulture. I've taken 3/4 of the classes needed for a bachelor's in horticulture. For personal reasons, I'm leaving it at that and coming back later for it. And I worked for 2 semesters in a plant biology greenhouse/conservatory on campus. I also keep well over a dozen plants on my own. All I mean by saying that is that I know how to water plants. I also know that when you water plants that are for sale, needing to look nice, and bunched together tightly and frequently shaded, you want to avoid drenching the foliage so the plants can breathe and take up water to avoid root rot and the foliage dying. Presentable flowers get sold, rotting flowers do not. I was watering them by using a long handheld sprayer, shooting the water into my cupped hand and directing the water underneath the foliage with my hand. Honestly, I think it was a clever move, since no one else watered them that way and 1/3 of our stock seemed to be lost to rot. In comes a 60-year-old man who tells me I'm doing it wrong. His wife is nearby. I ignore him. He tells me I'm doing it wrong again. I've had a long day by this point. It's hot and in the middle of the summer in the Midwest, and I'm irritated. So I keep ignoring him. Then he tells me that I'm wrong again and that I'm stupid for doing it the way I'm doing it, and that he's owned a commercial greenhouse for 30 years so he knows what he's talking about. After he told me I'm stupid for doing it this way, I turned to him and sternly said, and loudly, "Shut the F up and leave me alone." He stood there for a second, a brief moment of shock, and then he yelled, "Where is your manager? I'm going to report you." Remember how I said that I don't work for the store? I looked at him and said, he oversees 7 different stores in this part of the state. Good luck finding him. It should also be noted that my boss was a woman, not a man, but I opted not to say that. At this point, he was getting really flustered. His wife came over looking sheepish and put her hands around his arm and gently started pulling him away. Nothing ever happened, so I assumed he either couldn't find someone who cared or didn't tell anyone. I just love it whenever people come into your job and tell you that you're doing your job wrong, whenever you probably know more than them, and then they give you some false like, "Oh, I've worked doing this before." Well, maybe how I'm doing it is better. Also, you're 3/4 of the way through your degree. I think you probably know a little bit more now. Our next post comes from AMZVH. Broken Whisk. I work on the customer service desk for a UK retailer. Today I had a customer come to the desk and return an electric hand mixer/whisk that wasn't working. He had already gone and picked up another one to exchange for the broken one. I asked him what's wrong for the mixer, and he tells me that it doesn't turn on, and asked me to check the new one with him to make sure that one would work before he takes it home with him. I turn around to check the mixer, and he has it taken out of the box and is pressing the power button, getting very annoyed that this one doesn't work as well. He's returned 5 of those mixers now because none of them turn on. I listen to him and then say, "You do know they need to be plugged in." At which point he starts telling me he's glad I was here and no, he didn't realize you needed to plug them in. When his wife returns from the toilet, he tells her they need to be plugged in, and she says, "That's ridiculous. Why do they need to be plugged in?" These customers were probably around 65 years old. Surely they must be familiar with a plug. The mixer has a plug hanging from it. What did they think it was for? Why does it need to be plugged in? Maybe because that's how electrical current works? You plug something in that's electric, and the electricity that's provided by the power grid gets pushed through it so it's actually able to be powered. That's why it needs to be plugged in. Also, if you're 65, you were born around the time that these things were created, because I think that they were created in the 50s with power mixers. So there's no reason you shouldn't know that. This next post comes from Adriel Blast. Persistent check casher. Okay, so this happened to me yesterday, but according to coworkers, it has been happening since Friday. Like my last post, this took place at the gas station job and it pertains to a certain customer determined to cash a check. It was a normal Monday night. which by that I meant 90% of our sales was alcohol since the store is in a neighborhood full of alcoholics. We often get checks written over the amount for cash back, so I usually don't think too much about it so long as they have an ID on hand. Well, this one lady came in and with a small handful of things to buy, delivered me a pre-written check well over the total for cash back. It raised numerous red flags right away. Here's the thing. Our store is the one of the few in my city that takes out-of-town checks, but we don't take checks from out of state. So if you have a check from Florida, you won't be able to use it here. Her check was from Minnesota, though her ID was of this state. Second was that it wasn't a bank check. We'll accept credit union checks only if the union is one from our town, but we don't take checks from out-of-town unions. I usually distrust pre-written checks. It's my own personal thing. I prefer to see the check handwritten when people pay with one. It was over the total amount on its own, not bad, but the check was roughly $115 over. 40 is our max for cash back. It was written in red ink, and unless something had changed, banks can't accept checks in red because something about their systems. Save for pre-written, all of those are grounds to reviews because store rules. But when I explained it to her, good lord, you'd have thought I hit her and then threw her dog off of a bridge. She was offended and pissed and kept going on and on over how we always take her checks. How I'm so unreasonable and being incredibly rude for refusing. I explained to her the rules again and specified that our owners specifically told us not to accept checks that did any of those things. Oh, no. She wanted me to call the manager. Claimed to be best friends with the manager. It was past 9 at night. Our manager would have been asleep because she does the 5 a.m. opening. I told her that no, I am not going to wake up my manager for this. If you claim to be such good friends, then go ahead and call her. She didn't, of course. At that point, she had gotten some other's attention in the store, and one of our regulars in the casino had come out and was standing off to the side to see if he needed to intervene. He's a very big guy, but very nice. Always steps in when our drunk customers get out of hand. I just told her that she needs to leave. Instead of leaving with her dignity, she threw the check at me and said she'd be back for her money, that she'll call the owner and that I can kiss this job goodbye, and I won't have any luck getting employed elsewhere due to my attitude. Of course, she never came back to my shift. I informed my boss and left a note for the manager in the morning. I found out she's been coming in at different times these past few days trying to find an employee who'd cash the check. Would have had better luck if the ink wasn't red. It concerns me that in the year 2020, people are still using checks to pay for small budget items. I'm talking like up to $100. Because generally, if you use your card, your bank is going to accept it. Now, I mean, over that, your bank may be like, ooh, this is fishy. But in the year 2020, you don't need to write a check to pay for something that's like $15. There's no reason. Just use your card. This next post comes from Aphrodite Kiss 80. No good deed goes unpunished. So I worked for a dollar store chain when there was a coin shortage. We were encouraged to ask customers if they had change so we wouldn't deplete the change in our till. I usually kept a little change on me for customers who were just a few pennies over so they wouldn't have to break a bill. Most customers were very appreciative of this. One day I asked a customer if she had the correct change and she said she didn't. Her total was $3.04 or something close to that, and she was paying with a $5 bill. So I put in the extra change to give her that $2 change. She asked where her change was and I explained that I put the extra pennies in for her. She loses it and demands a refund for her transaction so she can pay with a card instead. I had to call my supervisor to do the refund, holding up my line for several minutes. The customer then blames me for the customers behind her being delayed, all over 4 cents. The other customers were upset, with her, not me, because of the situation. I learned no good deed goes unpunished, I guess. I quit a couple weeks later for a better job that pays more and is less stressful. Really? You're gonna freak out over 4 cents? Come on. The person used their own till money to cover the cost, and you're gonna complain about that. Whenever there is a coin shortage in the United States. Use a Karen. Our final post for today comes from Lacrimosa Ever. Being told to shut up and what happened after. So this happened a few years ago when I was still a cashier at a certain blue-themed department store. We offered a no taxes discount on applicable items to those with a native status card. And to apply this, they needed to present the card at the beginning of the order we would check it for validity, and the order would begin. Well, one fated day, a couple comes through, maybe mid to late 30s, and they have a medium-sized order, which I process with no problems. No indication of what is to come until I tell them their total. The man says they have a status card, and I tell him that unfortunately, they would have needed to declare it at the beginning of the order for me to apply the discount. The woman starts insisting that we can do it for her, that we've done it before, etc. So I call the CSM, customer service manager, equivalent of a front-end supervisor, over to explain the situation and ask if there's anything we can do. I still want to help the customer at this point, even if she's been a little rude. The CSM explains that short of erasing the order and scanning it in again, this time with the discount in place, there's nothing to be done. The woman chooses that, and while the CSM is erasing the order, I say in an apologetic tone, "I'm sorry. This is why we need you to show us the card at the beginning of the order." By which I meant that it would have taken even longer for them to be able to leave. Admittedly, this was not the best thing I could have said at the time, but she snapped at me. Not an exact quote, but the gist of what she actually said. "I knew that you could do it, so don't be stupid." I said something else. I think something to the effect of, "Please don't call me that, ma'am." To which she replied even more venomously. And although I don't remember the first part of her sentence, I could never forget the second part. "Maybe it's time for you to shut up." I had never been told to shut up by a customer before. I'd had my fair share of rude customers before, to be sure, and even been sworn at and had my intelligence insulted. But for some reason, being told to shut up like that was the tipping point. Because I did shut up, and after they were gone, the man whose order was next asked if I was alright. And all I could do was ask another CSM if I could go to the bathroom, where I promptly burst into tears. When I came out, obviously still quite upset but not crying anymore, the front-end manager told me to take my lunch early. When I came back is when this story takes a turn. Apparently the manager and yet another CSM had been standing at the front doors watching for this couple to drive by, and when they saw them, the front-end manager actually ran after their car, and when he managed to stop them, went off on them about how they treated me and proceeded to ban them from the store. I hadn't particularly gotten along with my manager before then. He's harmless, just very outgoing and slightly odd personality. But this incident instilled me with a newfound respect for him, and a stiff upper lip about customers. Man, I don't understand how customers can be so rude sometimes. Like, the cashier is still a person. They are doing a job. They're getting paid to do that job, and if they're doing it to the best of their ability, there's nothing else they can do. It is on you that you did not remember to show your card at the beginning. It is not on them. They don't have to remind you about that. It's probably posted in policy somewhere. And to scream at somebody to shut up because you don't agree with what they said? What are you, fucking 5? Are you a little baby? Come on, man. Grow up. Well, alright, my Action dudes and darling dames. That is going to do it for today's episode of r/Tales from Retail. I hope you liked the stories, and if you did, I'm going to link them in the description as always. And if you liked the video, subscribe, share, drop a like, and a comment down below what would you like to see me read next. A humongous thank you to everyone who's continued to subscribe and who is continuing to push out my channel. I cannot thank y'all enough for what y'all do for me and what y'all do for the channel, and it makes me so glad to know that y'all are still watching. But with that being said, I will see you in the next video.